Hey y'all, how are ya?
Alright.
If I haven't met you yet, I'm usually behind this wooden structure here. My name is Neal, and I'm glad to be here with you today. Apart from sitting behind the piano, am helping to start a new collaboratory up north in Ravenna. So this space has been an incubator not only for new organizations and small organizations to do social change in the world, but also for itself. It has incubated itself and is inspiring a movement beyond these walls. So I'm excited about that and excited to share some stories with you about that another day. And excited for you to check it out too. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you a little bit who I am, since maybe we haven't met. There are a lot of new faces here today, so if you're new here, it's so cool to see you today. And it's so great that the sun's out. So welcome. I also want to just kind of name the little bit of awkwardness that there's another white person up here on a day that is celebrating someone who was oppressed and marginalized and abused by white people. So I just want to hold that and recognize that. And Yasmin named so well that we are on Duwamish land, that we are in this perpetual cycle, it seems, of abuse. And in the ways that I want to fight against that, I also want to realize and recognize that I am participating in that. And so that brings me to a story I want to tell you a little bit about. I'm going to move hopefully out of the way of the speaker a little bit, so it'll stop me back. A little bit of a story about when I felt welcome. So in 2012, I had the first glimpse of what beloved community could look like. One of the first nights I was woken up by screams of people in pain from horrific wrecks, women giving birth and sobs of people learning that they had lost loved ones. The next morning, we set off up on a steep mountain on the way to church. We were already over an hour late because the school bus that we had been riding in could not handle the mountain roads. But we were heading off nonetheless. I was a little anxious. I'm one of those people who hates to be late. I'm of the idea that 5 minutes early is on time and on time is late. And that's a tension that is held between me and my partner. But what we learned in Haiti was that this is not necessarily the way their culture works. And so they're okay with being late. Time there is not the same. And so as we were in this truck, several people standing in the bed of a truck holding on for dear life, I think I was sitting inside the truck. Anyway, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is what the person driving said to me as we kept asking questions about what to expect, what's it going to look like, what are we going to do, who are we going to meet, how long are we going to be there. And Dorlis said to us, "You'll see as you go." And we were like, "Well, yeah, but what are we going to see?" And he was like, you'll see as you go." So there were 12 of us, all white American people that had no idea what to expect when we arrived in Haiti. None of us had been there, or any other developing country for that matter. We were excited but anxious, and we passed tens of thousands of people who had been displaced by an earthquake just months before. There'd never been a time in my life that I'd been more welcomed or cared for and experienced how powerful the beloved community could be, even from people who had absolutely nothing. And so I think it's powerful, the story that Naomi shared, that this place, this country, was given this statue, which it mentions in the poem. I just was in Rome, and so I learned that Colossus used to be the statue that sat outside of the Colosseum, and I'm learning from this poem after reading it again, it sounds like that Colossus was also a Greek statue. But in the time of Nero, there was this huge statue that represented Nero, this Colossus, and that's how the Colosseum, which was called the Flavian Amphitheater, became called the Colosseum after Colossus that sat outside of it. So this place, again, of oppression, of abuse, and now we have Statue of Liberty that's supposed to be this beacon of hope and place of this oppressive statue of Colossus, this new Colossus that's going to represent a place of freedom, of prosperity, of equality, of justice. Doesn't feel like that is necessarily what's happening right now. So, another story from Haiti. We had gone on a 2-hour trip up another mountain, and we're making our way back, and we get to a town called Guadalupe. And in this town, it was unlike any town square I can really think of in America to equate it to. There are just people everywhere, vendors on the streets, women carrying these packages, I don't know what to call them, just bags of stuff. I mean, literally this big on their head, and they're walking around, and it's just chaos. And we get into a wreck. We're hit by a tap-tap, which is a truck that is like a small Datsun truck, if you know what those are. I mean, it's a really small truck, but they would pile 20, 30 people into these trucks. And so our school bus is hit by a tap-tap, and we were like, crap, what do we do now? And so what ensues after that is maybe one of the scariest times in my life. All of a sudden we had probably 3 security guards and 4 or 5 interpreters on the bus with us, and they run off the bus, and before we know it, there are guns and knives and pipes, and I thought this could be it. They're going to shoot these people, and they're going to come on the bus and shoot us and rob us, and that would be that. Fast forward through the story, there is a person, Figgins, one of the interpreters, who somehow, he's just one of those people that can really bring some lightness and brevity to situations, and he somehow de-escalated it, and everybody kind of went their own separate ways. And at the very end, as we were getting ready to pull off, Figgins comes back on the bus and says, "Hey guys, I'd like to give this guy some money." And we were like, "What?" It was like, this guy, we found out, was drunk and ran into our bus, and yet Figgins was like, "I want to give him money because he needs to fix his tap-tap. This is the only thing he has. This is the only way that he can support his family. And if right now his tap-tap's broken, and so we're going to leave him destitute and broken here at a low point in his life." And I was like, oh my, like, how American of me to be like, no, it's his fault. He should pay for it. But Figgins is building the beloved community here. We heard the story of Peter and Jesus. So just a little bit of backstory in case you don't know what's going on here. Peter, before this, had denied Jesus as Jesus was being arrested. So denying him that he knew Jesus. So there's lots of layers to this, but the people that were arresting Jesus were asking, "Do you know this man?" And Peter's like, "No, I don't know that guy." And maybe it was for a good cause and maybe it wasn't. But anyway, Jesus was arrested and crucified, and Peter felt awful for having denied his best friend. But what is happening here is Jesus is inviting Peter, calling Peter back into the community, restoring him, saying, "Peter, do you love me? Then feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Then take care of my lambs." Which essentially Jesus is saying here, like, Peter, I want you to do what I'm doing. I want you to lead this community. I want you to take this mantle. And Peter is like, I just denied you, and of course I love you, but you asked me 3 times, and that's like breaking my heart. But what's happening here is this agape love, the same agape love that was happening on the bus when we were hit by the tap-tap driver, the same agape love that was happening when we were riding on the way to church, and Dulles said, "You'll see as you go," and the same agape love that Martin Luther King talks about. It says on the King Center website, the core value of the quest for Dr. King's beloved community was agape love, which he described as understanding, redeeming goodwill for all, an overflowing love which is purely spontaneous, unmotivated, groundless, and creative. The love of God operating in the human heart. He said that agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people. It doesn't begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people. It begins by loving others for their sakes. It makes no distinction between a friend and an enemy. It is directed toward both. Agape is love seeking to preserve and create community. I thought those words were pretty powerful. And so just a little bit more about who Peter was, and maybe we can identify with this. Were you ever in school with somebody that was always jumping out of their seat with their hand to answer the question of the teacher? I kind of imagine John like that.
I was in school like that.
Yeah. John's like this 6'9" or something person, and he's like sitting on the front row, and he's always like, I know the answer. That's Peter. Yeah. Peter was like the classic overachiever, suck up kind of guy. No connection there. And always wanted to do the right thing, wanted to have the answer, wanted to be the best follower, because he wanted to do what Jesus was asking of him. And so this is kind of playing into how hard it was when Peter was asked 3 times, do you love me? Just try to imagine your best friend saying, do you love me? Yeah, of course I love you. But do you love me? Yes, I love you. And then a 3rd time it's like, why are you not hearing me? Of course I love you. Some scholars will say that this 3 times thing is also in a symbol of replacing the 3 denials that Jesus had with Peter. But I think it's one of those things that often we need to hear things 3 times or multiple times before we get it. A friend of mine told me that their child will say, Daddy, 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 because they know it takes 3 daddies before they turn around. And I think it's similar for Peter. He needed it 3 times before it really sunk in what Jesus is about to hand him and say, Peter, I need you to continue this movement. You're going to be the person who takes this movement on. So here we have somebody who's denied knowing Jesus and returned to his old day job of fishing. And so Jesus says, Peter, do you love me more than these? Which I think is referencing these nets and boats that are here that you can read about before this passage. And saying, Peter, do you love me more than what you're comfortable with? Do you love me more than what you know? Do you love me more than that community that is hurting people, is oppressing people, is pitting person against person? Do you love me enough to step into this new beloved community, even though it's going to be hard? So what Jesus is asking is a very deep question. And it took 3 times for it to really sink in. So after Peter's been restored to the community and he's been welcomed back and he's taken on or is being given this mantle of leadership, I can imagine that Peter starts to feel this anxiousness. I think about the times that I've messed up in my life, and then I feel awkward going back into a community after I've messed up. I can't think of an exact example off the top of my head, but there are definitely times when I've done something dumb. If I came here and I broke the light or something, I'd be like, I don't even want to go back, because people are going to be like, oh, that's the guy who broke the light.
I can think of a few if you want.
Yeah, help out.
They don't think to the man in the back of the room. So this kind of self-exile, which you could abbreviate to sex, I guess, self-exile that Peter is doing here, I think is a common thing that we hold in our hearts as humans, that we want to preserve ourselves from having to deal with the hardness and the uncomfortableness of being a part of a community, of being called out, but also of being loved. Some of the hardest things about coming back into a community after you've done something stupid is being forgiven. Hearing those words of, you're forgiven, we still love you, that's hard to hear. It's a heavy weight sometimes, but it also is like simultaneously the most amazing feeling. It's just such a weird thing. And what I believe about community is that it's not just a place where we are unraveled, but it's a place where we can be knit back together. I think we can be unraveled in a number of ways these days, right? We can watch the news, we can go to work, we can hear things about politics, we can have a dumb uncle who posts too much on Facebook, which is my wife's case. Yesterday we got into this long debate about her uncle who posted, I counted it, I think it was 14 times in 2 days, about the comment of I won't say the word, but the poop hole countries that has been going around. 14 times in 2 days, he's posting and defending this. And I was like, I'm being sucked into this, and I'm being unraveled by someone who should not hold this power over me. So community is a place where we can be unraveled, but be also knit back together into something stronger and more powerful than we were before. Peter, I imagine, was feeling hopeless and like a failure, mourning the death of his best friend. The tap-tap driver was probably beginning to spiral, wondering how his family could eat and survive. But it was the restoring of relationship that allowed not only for peace, but for community to happen. Martin Luther King Jr., Jesus, both were people about unraveling empire, but about knitting together the beloved community. In 1959, in his sermon on Gandhi, Dr. King elaborated on the after effects of choosing nonviolence over violence. The aftermath of nonviolence, this is what Dr. King says, is the creation of the beloved community. So that when the battle's over, a new relationship comes into being between the oppressed and the oppressor. In the same sermon, he contrasted violent versus nonviolent resistance to oppression. The way of acquiescence leads to moral and spiritual suicide. The way of violence leads to bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. But the way of nonviolence leads to redemption and the creation of the beloved community. You know, I find myself almost daily in this tension wrestling with, am I a Christian? Do I want that label? And I have to be honest, most days I do not. Even though I'm a United Methodist pastor, I don't want the label of Christian because it has some associations and connotations that I hate. I don't want to be associated and have those relations. But when I look back at what being a Christian really was, or at least the beginnings of Christianity, it's all about subversion. It's about tearing down empire, about building community, about justice, about equality, about love. And I'm like, oh, I am a Christian. You know, the word Christian, the label Christian, was not something that came from Jesus or from the disciples, or it was from other people that said, oh, those people that are doing that stuff, those are Christians. And that's what I want to be. I want to be the person that people see doing justice and love and equality and building beloved community and saying, oh, that guy must be a Christian, not what we hear in the news. And so I want to take like 4 or 5 minutes and ask you to do something that might be uncomfortable. I'm an introvert and I hate it when people do this, and I can imagine that you're sitting here, if you're an introvert, already going, God, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway, to split up into like groups of 3 or 4 and just to ask yourselves a couple of questions. So first question, how do you experience community? And then second question, is it easy? You know, is it comfortable? Is community easy? And I want to be respectful of our time. So if you have a phone, pull it out and set a timer for like 5 minutes. And then you'll know then that, and we'll have 1 minute left. We'll have 6 minutes to kind of share this. And then I want to come back together and hear a couple of things that you said, and we'll wrap up quickly. But one thing I hope that you'll do is not just turn around to people that you know or you came with or that make you comfortable, but take a deep breath, embrace your inner anxiety or introvertedness.
Just grab the extrovert next to you.
Grab the extrovert next to you and try to embrace this uncomfortableness and experience a little bit of what it feels like to have a beginning of beloved community build up. So we'll take 6 minutes, set up a timer for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back together after that.
Can you say the question again?
Yes, the questions are, how do you experience community? And the second one is it easy?
Yes, yes. Third, fourth.
anxiety producing at the beginning versus the end? How do you feel? What do you think about that experience?
I like hearing from people.
You like hearing from people?
It's a risk
There was a risk involved.
in community.
Community service.
Thanks for giving us that invite, because Sunday during this time isn't always that kind of place where we have that kind of one-on-one conversation. We talked about a couple things that community, that there's an implication of covenant, which implies accountability. We talked about human community and more than human community, and I won't expand on that, but all of those things being relevant.
Yeah.
And needing to reciprocate invitation when people are in different places. Like maybe I'm feeling low and I need you to invite me into something, or vice versa.
You mean like sometimes you're in a valley and sometimes you're...
One way to say it. One way to say it. That was great, yeah.
What else?
There are valleys on top of the mountain. Crevices.
And crevices, yeah.
Crevasses.
Yes.
Sure do.
I'm glad you didn't ask the question, are you a Christian?
Yeah. I don't think this is that kind of church. Not this kind of community. Yeah, so is it easy? Is community easy?
Nope. Not good.
People follow
Not
directions would be.
You know,
Or is that type of community?
I think Jesus talks so much about love and prayer a lot, because community is not easy. That he instructed on love a lot, and he instructed on prayer a lot. Because I'm driven to prayer about people a lot, and it's a lot easier for me to relate to my kittens. But even with him, I have to resort to prayer.
Yeah, we've got one dog that is amazing and one dog that is not. So there's prayers of thankfulness and prayers of patience. Yeah, my experience when I do stuff like this is I often hate the process of getting into it. And then I walk away from it going, man, that was great. Like I met this person I would have talked to otherwise, and they're awesome, and now I know something about them, and we're stronger together. And if it turns out they know somebody that I know, and now this beloved community is growing bigger and bigger, rather than remaining segregated and different crevasses and little categories. I think it's a really powerful thing, even though it's not easy to be in community, and it takes intention. It takes us stepping out of our comfort zone, and it takes us giving up some of our own preferences. But Chris shared something that I thought was really powerful in our group. She mentioned that we have to know ourselves to be in community, and I think that is a really essential part that often is left out. We don't know ourselves, and we're not able to then fully engage. And that's not to say that you have to know everything about yourself. I think we continue to learn more and more about ourselves, and community can help us dive into ourselves even deeper, right? But you have to figure out who you are, what's true for you. I think part of the reasons that folks can be sucked into unhealthy communities is because they're not really touching in with themselves and finding out what's important for me. What are the values that I really hold for myself? Not what the media tells me or my Facebook friends tell me, but what's really true for me? And how can I take that and offer it open-handedly to a community and not let it be stolen, but let it be amplified and grown and cultivated? I kind of want to just leave us with one thought as we finish up today, on the heels of, or not on the heels of, but getting ready to step into MLK Day. And so this notion came to me about the Jewish culture in first century Palestine was about, there was this long school process, and then if you made it through the school process, if you were one of the best of the best, you would become a disciple of a rabbi. You would ask a rabbi who you appreciated and respected if you could be their disciple. And so a rabbi, when they accepted you, you would pretty much lay down all of the rest of your life. You wouldn't go to trade school and that sort of stuff. You would follow this rabbi. So this is one of the things that makes Jesus so radical, from being a rabbi and picking people that were tradespeople, that were not the best of the best, right? The community that Jesus gathered were people that were doing jobs, so they were not the best of the best students. But this really cool thing, saying from, and please correct me if I say this wrong, Naomi, from Avat, which is part of the Jewish scripture, says, Chavei mitabek bafar rak lachem, which literally means, and be powdering yourself with the dust of their feet. And so as you're walking behind a rabbi learning from them, their dust would be stirred up and you would powder them, or you would sit at their feet to learn and the dust from their feet would kind of rest on your skin and you would be caked in that. And I thought that that's a really powerful image for us to carry tomorrow if you're going to be part of the march, or as you dig in your garden or spend time outside today, that we remember the ancestors that have gone before us, that we remember Jesus, MLK, Gandhi, Tutu, Mother Teresa, Dr. McKinney here, all of these people that have done this work for so long, that may we be covered in their dust. May we feel their presence drift down and rest on our skin, and may it cake on us and protect us, but also help us feel embraced. May we become more comfortable with being uncomfortable, trusting that we will see as we go, and that together we can and will become the beloved community.